Okay, guys, good morning. Welcome back. Week 6, I realized, and you are a week behind the other sections. I've been trying my best, but I can't push you enough. I've only been able to compensate for 1 hour, but whatever it is. I mean, my last topic anyway was something that if it's not done, it's okay, right? I'll still cover all the contents of my course. So today's agenda, we'll be talking about exception handling in C Sharp. Hopefully you've seen it before or are seeing it right now in Java 2. You're doing advanced Java with Tony, right? So you should be seeing it. Okay, now what do I see here? Okay, better. Okay, so we'll learn how to validate our input. So last week we were only doing ifs and switches where we were just checking for certain values to be lying within range. So if quantity was greater than 0 and stuff like that, or checking which radio button was on. So we had worked on control structures last week. I haven't completed them. Just to let you know, I will be doing whiles and the loops when I do arrays, right? Because that's the best place to do your iterative statements. So for you guys, that will be most probably now after the reading week. So we'll do that when I do arrays. I'll cover the rest half of the control structures. So today I'm going to talk about try-catch blocks. I'm going to incorporate exception handling in my program that I was doing last week. So if you have it, please open it up. If you haven't, it should be up on Blackboard under your weekly learning class examples. Okay, so there should be a zipped file. It is the one on coffee sales. So if you don't have it, or if you want to start fresh with me, you can download it from GitHub if you like. You can download it from Blackboard if you like, whatever works for you. Okay, so we'll work on that. I'll refresh your memories as to what we were doing and then talk about what I want to do today. Okay, keep in mind that exception handling and error handling are both necessary, absolutely necessary in a program. If you don't validate your input, your output is not reliable. It's the GIGO rule, right? Garbage in, garbage out. So if you don't validate your input and your input is garbage, don't expect any good results out of your application. So every programmer will do defensive programming, keeping in mind all kind of exceptions and errors that can occur. So how are exceptions different from errors? Why are we trying to differentiate between them? Exceptions are something that the system may throw, right? For example, I'm trying to convert a string into an integer, and that string is Anju. Can do that, right? But if the string is 1, 2, 3, then I can convert it into an integer. That would be an example. Suppose I'm asking the user for an integer, and the user gives an integer that is out of range. You know that every integer has a range, right? In C Sharp and in any other language, you have different flavors of integers, and every integer has a range. You can only save as much as what you can save in those number of bits. So that would be an overflow exception, for example. The user can also throw exceptions under certain conditions. You'll say if my quantity is less than 0, throw an exception. So instead of maybe putting a message on the screen or whatever, you can throw an exception to. So there are some predefined exceptions in C Sharp, arrays out of bounds and format exception, overflow exception, and there's all these exceptions are available in C Sharp. And of course, they belong to the class called exception, and then the exception class has subclasses and so on. And your job is, and when are they thrown? They are thrown when you are using a method of a particular class and you haven't followed the rules of the class, okay, of the method, sorry. So for example, a simple example that we'll do today, I'll use the parse method, and the parse method will throw exceptions if you're not parsing the right value into the right type, a right type into right type. So I'll show you how to do it. And as I said, you can create your own exception classes if you like, as in Java, and you can throw exceptions in your code if you like. So instead of just putting a message on the screen, if you want to throw an exception, you could do that. So we'll try to see if I can cover that too today. I mean, it's not as if you have to do it, but it's some users just prefer to throw exceptions and say, oh, this is what has happened, right? So what do exceptions also give us let us do is basically, instead of the programming abnormally terminating, we control it, right? So the program does not terminate abnormally and we control it. And how do we control it? Maybe we give a message on the screen. Maybe we let the user to give the input again. So it's kind of more neat and better, instead of the program just going whoop and there it is. For example, let's run this program that we wrote last week, and I'll show you how and when an exception is thrown, what happens. So this was a program in which a customer could order more than one coffees of different types, and till the user said I'm done, you could kind of keep ordering, right? So I'm going to order one of cappuccino and say calculate selection. Oops. And it works perfectly fine, nothing wrong in it, right? Let's clear for next item. Oh, it would be a nice idea that in clear for next item, automatically my cursor comes back here, right? Instead of me using the mouse. So as you work with an interface, you see, oh, I could improve that. So when I do a clear for next item, it would be a good idea to bring the focus back to your quantity text box, because there is where the user will start. Okay, and that's our tab order also. Now let's try to do something. Let's try to give a quantity which is AA. That's not a valid integer. Right? That's not a valid integer. So let's say calculate. And this is what happens, right? The program says, I don't know what you've done. So that's basically abnormal behavior of your code, right? And of course, if a user is using it, the user has no idea what you're trying to tell here. So definitely the programmer knows what's going on. I and you know what's going on. It is trying to say that a format exception was unhandled, and it kind of says input string was not in correct format. Now I know what went wrong. I was trying to put AA. I did put AA, and I'm trying to convert this text called AA into an int, right? Int.parse, if you remember, the parse method converts a string into an integer, and you can do that. You cannot convert AA into an integer. It is not a valid integer, and that's what has happened. You have a format exception, and this is what we want to handle now. Right, so keep in mind, the programmer should handle each and every kind of exception that can occur in code. Right, this if that you've written, so you can close this. You'll have to, the program won't go on. It's kind of stuck. See, so you'll have to stop it and then retry it. So, but this kind of error that we did, where if quantity was greater than 0, this is not an exception. This is something that you're validating. It's not something that is wrong with the input. So the input was correct, you took it, you converted it, and now you're just checking that is my quantity greater than 0. So you are doing additional validation, but this is not a case of exception handling. This is more a case of error handling, right? So validation can be done in different ways. Validation can result in exceptions. Validation can result in errors. You could be putting messages on the screen for the user. The user knows what goes wrong. Let the user try again, and so on and so forth. Okay, so today's job, how to handle exceptions like format exception. Let's take another example. Let me run it for you again. I'm going to put an integer, but I'm going to put an integer that is beyond limits. So definitely, I've kind of pressed my one a few times, right? And I say, okay, let's calculate. So I'm trying to get that coffee, those many coffees. And again, I have an overflow exception. It says you're trying to convert into an integer. And what are you doing? You've given me a value that I can't handle. That is an int value. You'll say all ones is an int value, but it is out of your range, right? So it says I can do it. So you again have another exception called overflow exception. So exceptions can occur, and it is the job of the programmer to take care that all exceptions are handled in the code. Right? So how will you know what it handles or so on? If you bring your mouse to your method, for example, I've just brought it to my parse method. Notice how it says converts the string representation of a number to its 32-bit signed integer. And then it says the exception that it throws are format exception, we saw that, overflow exception, we saw that, and it says argument null exception. It's saying that the argument you've given me is null, right? That's what it is saying. The value is null. Okay, so for our case, that will not occur because, it's a string, and worst case, it's empty. You know what I mean? It's an empty string. So even that will throw a format exception. But again, it's your job to take care. So I kind of go cappuccino and I go calculate selection. Oh, we had already taken care of this. So for me, it will not occur because I've already taken care of this. But the argument null exception will not occur for us, just because our text will never be null. You know what I mean? I've never initialized it to null. I could if I wanted, and then if I did that, I would have this exception. So your job is that since this method is throwing a format exception, an overflow exception, and an argument null exception. And to be on the safe side, any kind of exception will handle all these exceptions. You'll say, can I just handle it together? You could, but a generic message like something is wrong with input makes no sense. But if it says your input should be an integer, you've given a string, or you've given a non-integer, or it says something like you've given a value out of range, that is more helpful than just saying something is wrong with the input. So I would like to see correct, complete error messages for every error that can occur. I don't want to see a generic message. So I'll do it that way, and I expect you to do it the same way, right? Like think about it. If you were using a software and you made some errors, and what comes up is just a generic message, some error occurred, you have no clue what's going on. And that, of course, is irritating, right? So it's always important that you do exception handling, and you take care that every field that can cause problems is handled, in the sense is validated, and for every exception that can occur in that input field is also handled. And that's what we will do today. So on our form, if you see, for now, right now, we'll do it for one, and then I'll kind of give you the generic way of doing it. I only have one input field, kind of. The coffees are just radio buttons, so I can't give an input there. I can select it or not, but that's just normal. I can't do anything else with it. So we've already taken care of it, that a coffee must be selected. My other input is my takeout, a checkbox, which again, you could either check it or uncheck it. There is nothing much to do about it. So the only input field, the only input value, at least in this form, is the quantity value. So my aim is to take care of this quantity value, that this quantity value is given by the user. So right now on my form, I only have one input field, but definitely you could have as many number of input fields, and you will do one in the assignment today, in class. And your job is to take care of every input field that is present, to validate every input field. Okay, if it's a float, if it's an int, anything. Text fields, the maximum you can do with text fields is maybe check that they are not empty. Right, that's all you can do about it, not much. But if you start validating it using regular expressions that the value should be exactly this and so on, it can be done too, right? But usually in strings, there is not much you could do about it in terms of what can the user give. The user can give anything in a text field. So it's the numeric fields which need our attention more. But definitely in a text field, you can always check that it should not be left empty. You can do additional error handling on it. As I said, you could validate your input. If you are asking for a phone number, you could give a format. You could say it should be all digits, could have a dash or brackets or whatever. Okay, and that can be done through regular expressions, which is beyond the scope of my teaching here in this course, because it's a whole thing in its own. But we did a little small thing in masking, if you remember. In a program, I said we'll mask it. Only 5 input numeric digits are allowed. So that's kind of validating a text field. Okay, so let's see how now I can handle this exception that we were getting. We got 2 of them. We got a format exception when I tried to convert the quantity value AA into an integer, and I got an overflow exception when I tried to convert a big value that was out of range. You can do it on the negative side also. Anything that's out of range of an integer will give you an overflow exception. We saw that the parse method also has a third kind of exception, which was basically argument null. And as I said, I'll just kind of create a generic block for all other kind of exceptions. So how do I know which exceptions to handle? All you do is whatever method you use, you find out, is that method creating any problems, right? Is doing anything. For example, in the convert, for example, if you bring your mouse to the convert, so convert is the class, bring your mouse to 232. It says convert does not contain a definition for 2int32. That's strange. Oh, because I had just written it in comments. Uh-oh. Okay, so what was it? I can't remember it now. I think it is 2. There it is. I hadn't completed it. I just showed you you could do it this way also. Okay, let's see. Bring your mouse over here. See, notice how the convert the 2int32 method which has 18 overloads. We won't go into that. It says converts the specified string represented of a number to an equivalent 32 signed integer. Notice the exception it is throwing. It is throwing a format exception and it is throwing an overflow exception. So if you're going to use this method, definitely you should take care of handling these two exceptions. Okay, so that's what you do. You'll say, how do I find out what kind of exceptions do I need to handle? You look at the methods you're using, go into the definitions, see what they are, see what exceptions they throw, and handle those exceptions, right? That's one. And two, extra validation. For example, quantity should be greater than 0. That's something you will have to think about your application. One of the coffee radio buttons should be selected, something that you have to do about it, right? So you'll have to see what do I need to work with in my input. Okay. Now to see how to handle exceptions, just to give you an idea, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of put it in on Word or whatever, doesn't matter. I could use TextPad. Maybe TextPad would be a better option just because it doesn't create a lot of problems with formatting and everything. Okay, so this is the kind of structure you will create. You will create a try block. That is small. Somewhere you should be able to say configure, preferences, editor. I'm just trying to increase the size. That's all I'm trying to do. Where can it be? It should be in editor. I don't see it in editor. View. No, we wouldn't be. Anything else? Do you think we could tools? No, that's the, oh, that's something I created long back. And no, not environment variables. Something in text. Oh, there it is, font. So let's go something like 18 or 20. I don't know. Okay, there. Better? Okay. So this is how you would write your try block in C#, right? So you start with try, and then you catch any kind of exceptions you want. So I'm just going to call it exception 1, exception 2, just for the heck of it. So that's your first catch block for exception 1. You have another exception to catch. That's your second catch. You have the generic exception, the big exceptions, the last one. And the rule is that write your specific exceptions first, and then write your catch block for the whole exception class. So you go from specific to generic, right? So you'll say, what is the meaning of specific and generic? So exception class is the big exception class under which all subclasses come. So exception class is my biggest generic class. That always comes at the end. You catch it always at the end. Then you have to double check which subclass belongs, which exception belongs to which subclass, and so on. So nesting may occur, or there could be nothing, no relationship. Then you can write your catches in any order. But if there is a class within a class within a class, inheritance, like there are subclasses, then the innermost class has to be caught first, that exception, then it's next, and so on. And therefore the exception is written at the end because it's the biggest exception class. It's the father of all exception classes, right? So I'll just call it EX just for it, and I'll put the last exception class. So you have to keep that in mind. The sequence of catching exceptions is important. Also, you could have a finally block, not necessary, optional, but you could have a finally block with your try catch, which basically means that I would like to do these statements irrespective of whether an exception occurred or it did not occur. So this finally block, as the name suggests, will always happen. What do you do usually in these finally blocks? Maybe if you're working with files, you would like to close them, right? If you have a database connection, you would like to disconnect. So things that you would like, bookkeeping things that you would like to do irrespective of whether the program was successful or unsuccessful, you would like to do, you put in the finally block. So the finally block is always executed. All statements in the finally block is executed. Now, what do you do in the try? In the try, you try to do something. That's why it's called the try. So for example, you try to parse, right? You'll say, oh, I want to parse. So you take an integer. I'm just kind of writing it very roughly. Take your quantity and you try to parse it. Some text. I'm just kind of giving it very roughly, right? Now, this is what you're trying to do. If everything is okay, it will do the rest, right? But if this method parse, for example, gives you an error, where will it jump to? It will jump to one of these catch blocks depending upon the exception that occurred. So if a format exception occurred, it would jump here. If an overflow exception occurred, it would jump here. You'll say, how do you know that? You name the exception. You'll say, oh, this is what happens when a format exception happens. This is what happens when an overflow exception happens. This is what happens when an argument null exception happens. And this is what happens when any other kind of exception happens, right? So you write your catch blocks with the name of the exception that you want to catch. So this is what happens. If a particular statement gives you a exception, gives you a problem, it will jump to the corresponding catch block and it will do what you tell it to do in the catch block. And usually what will you do in the catch block? You will show a message to the user, right? And maybe bring the focus back to the input field that has caused the problem, and the user will be prompted to enter again. And that's what you want to do. So that's your job, right? Now, if I have more than one fields, I want to work with, this is what you do. You write another try block inside it, and you write its catches. I'm again just going exception 1. You can say, oh, what if I have more than one fields? This is what you do. You write nested try catch blocks, right? So this is, I'm just giving you an example. See if you can understand it. And maybe if I have time, I can show it to you using in my own code. And it could or could not have a finally. Finally is optional. Now, maybe after the quantity, you're trying to read something like a price. Just to give you an idea. Double dot parse. I'm just using the parse method because that's what we are using in our code, right? So what did I do? I said, okay, my first job is I'm going to validate my integer. You'll say, what do you validate first, integer or price? I usually go with the physical sequence of input on my form. So if that's the first field I'm expecting from the user, I'll validate it first. If that's given, I'll validate the second one. If that's given, I'll validate the third one, and so on. So I go by the physical sequence of fields in my code. You could do it any way you like. By physical sequence, it just is more clear. So the first field is empty or format or something is wrong with it, the focus will go there. You know what I'm trying to say? So it doesn't matter how you do it, but your job is that you handle every exception with every input field. And this is the best way of doing it. You can choose whatever you like. Some programmers prefer to use a Boolean variable, and they'll just use a Boolean variable and set it to true or false or whatever, and then check, okay, what went wrong. And there are other ways of doing it. Instead of a parse method, there is a try parse method also. And the try parse method returns a value true or false. But all it does is, did it work or didn't it work? So I don't know why it didn't work. Was there a format problem? Was there an overflow problem? Was there an argument null problem? It doesn't say anything about it. So if I need to see exact error messages, different error messages for different problems, then you can't use the try parse, because try parse only returns a value of true or false. I'll show it to you, right? And then you try to do price. You try to now parse price. If there is a problem with price, this is going to check the price exception. So I'll just say price exception so that it kind of makes more sense. So you can say, oh, this is to do with price and this is to do with quantity. Of course, these names are just fake. It's always a good idea to write a catch for the generic exception. Always a good idea. Defensive programming. Just in case kind of stuff. So see, notice what I've done. There is a try and associated catch blocks with quantity. There is a try and associated catch blocks with price. Now, what are you saying? You are saying if quantity is fine, go forward. So you go to the next try. If something is wrong with quantity, it will come out. It will come out to one of these catch blocks, and then it will say, oh, this is what you do, right? If everything is, I just kind of write finally off so that you can say, see. right? If it says, oh, int went fine, quantity was okay, it comes to the next, it says, okay, quantity is fine, your field quantity is fine, now let me try to work with price. So then it tries to parse the price. If everything is okay with price, it will go ahead and do the calculations, which is what you want. So the calculations are kept inside the innermost try catch block, in the innermost try, because you're saying try to do this, everything is okay, now try to do this, everything is okay, now try to do this, oh, everything was okay, let me do my calculations. If in any of one of these tries, and these tries are just exception handling different inputs, if in any of these tries you have a problem, it will come out, it just jumps out of the try, goes to the corresponding catch that created the problem, of the exception that created the problem, and does the job. Okay, so this is the right place to keep your calculations. I'm going to save this, and also maybe, I don't know, maybe put it on GitHub for you if you like. I'll go to your Visual Studio and just put it. And I'll put it on Blackboard for you guys, okay? So that you have the idea of what I'm doing. So let's say try document, try catch or something, I don't know. And I'll put this on Blackboard. Yes.
Would that make more sense to have, like, under try you have in quantity equals in dot parse, and then double parse, and then double parse, and then you have like catch, price exception, catch, quantity exception, all in like the same.
Same. So you say instead of 2 tries, just create 1 try and do it. Now the only thing with that is you wouldn't know which of the parse created a problem. So would you tell the user, did the quantity create it, or did the both parse methods create the same kind of exceptions? So if I put the 2 together in 1 try, either one of them can cause a format. So which one caused, you wouldn't know. So your error message would not be clear, but in this one, it will absolutely be clear. Price cannot be a text, or price needs to be an integer, and in the other one, it will say quantity needs to be a double or whatever. So the error messages are complete and clear. So you could do that, but I wouldn't prefer it because I have no idea where the error occurred. So therefore, this is better where you have nested try catches, and they have their own catches, and each catch has a specific message for the specific field.
So, but if it's like you're converting string and then trying to do something else, would it make, like, if the errors aren't the same, would it make more sense to put it in the same?
Yeah, if the errors are same, but usually you will always deal with more than one input fields, and those input fields will be of a different nature, right? They will be. I mean, there will be some difference between the input fields. So I prefer to do it this way, because then you can give exact error messages with the exact fields. That's my way of working. I'm not imposing it on you, but if the assignment says this is a requirement, do it. If it doesn't say, it's up to you, right? Like, think about it yourself. Would you like to see, like, for example, you're driving a car and the car just kind of stops. If on your dashboard you could see something like out of gas, or something to do with oil, or something, some message which will exactly tell you where the problem is, you exactly know what's going on. But if you see an error message which says, oh, something occurred, then you don't know what went wrong. So that's my idea. My idea is that you should exactly know where the problem occurred. And this is one way of doing it. There are other ways of doing it also. If time permits, maybe towards the end, I'll show you. You can on each field, you can create an error kind of, it's not a message, but yeah, you can bring the focus back and say some error occurred there. That's another way of doing it. But to begin with, and Java does it the same way. So it's kind of common to do it this way. But again, it's up to you how you want to do it. So if nothing is asked in an assignment or in an exam, you're free to do whatever you like. But usually when I teach a certain way, I expect it to see a certain way. So my assignments will always have, please give a separate error message, and so on and so forth. You know what I mean? So yeah, you could have 1 try and all catches, but then you have no idea where did the problem occur. And that's the idea that I'm trying to do here. Okay, so this is the skeleton that I'm going to use. You have tries inside tries and whatever, as many number of fields and nested tries, and then your calculations occurs in the innermost try. Why? Because at this point, all input has been validated, and it is assumed that if you've reached here, you've taken care of everything, right? All okay, Mansi? Are you okay? Hmm? Okay, so let's try to do that. Okay. So let's try to do what we are doing. So we've already checked the if it is empty, we've already taken care. But remember, empty can also be taken care now in format exception. If you leave your field empty and you try to parse it and change it into an integer, it is going to throw a format exception. So if you want, you can remove this if totally from here and you can say, oh, format exception will take care. But some programmers say, why are you even trying to do something if the field is empty? So again, it's up to you. You can have an independent if outside and you can say, if my field is not empty, I start my job. Or you can say, let me do it and then format exception will occur if you try to convert an empty field. So I'll show you both ways, right? Okay, so let's see. And I was talking about try parse with you. Here, the try parse method is this. What is it saying? Oh, there is an out that is required. Okay, I'm not using the right format. The out is actually if everything goes okay, like if you are able to parse it, this is how you do it. I'll just try to show it. You know what? Let me not disturb this. The try parse works. Yes.
And out is a reference type, right? So it means you're making a reference to a variable. So you can pass in a variable.
Yes. The try parse has that out. Out means that you're creating a reference type. So instead of this, you could have done it like this also. You could have done an int.try parse just to show you so that you know. I don't like to use it because all it returns, notice it is saying it returns a Boolean value, converts the string representation of a number to its 32-bit sign integer. A return value indicates whether the conversion succeeded or not. That's all it says, yes or no. It doesn't tell you what kind of problem occurred. But again, it's a quick and dirty way, but like I prefer to use parse. So here is the second one. It says you can use a string, you can convert it into a particular style. And I'll show you. I mean, you can do more stuff with it. Number styles is simply saying you can ignore the dollar sign in it, which you can do in parse also. So if I go to the first one, because it's just easy, and if you try to convert this text quantity.text and into what kind of variable, notice it says out int result, right? Out is a reference. Out stands for that you're going to create a reference variable. We haven't yet talked about reference and value variables, but a reference means you can kind of think of it as an object, right? So there are two types, value types and reference types. Value types means their values are fixed, they go inside the box. So if I declare something as an int I, this is what happens in memory. I is created and the value goes inside it. This is a value box. Whereas a reference box means objects are reference types. A reference box means it has an address of where the value will be saved. That's the difference. That's the difference between a value type and a reference type. And objects all are references. And what is the advantage of reference boxes? You could either say advantages or you can say disadvantages. It's a reference type. So everybody has the address of that variable, of that where the variable is, and you can any method can change it. So we'll talk about it when the time comes. So it says, okay, where do you want to put the result? I'll say I want to put it in quantity. So instead of what I've done, I could also use this, right? Oh, what doesn't it like? Oh, therefore it doesn't know what that variable is. Thank you. Okay, now, oh, so that's one, and it is still complaining about something in here. There is a comma, yeah, because there are two values. Argument 2 must be passed with the out keyword. Oops, okay, forgot my out keyword. There it is. Right, you have to pass it here. So this is another way of doing it. I'm saying try to parse, change the text into an int. So therefore it is int.try parse. Instead of assigning it to a variable, you name the variable right in the argument list. Now, why don't I prefer it? Again, it's my personal preference. It just returns a Boolean value. So if it is successful, it will return a true. If it is unsuccessful, it will return a false. So you could, if you like, you could take a Boolean variable here and you could say result and assign it. And then you could check if result is true, that means you were able to do it. And if result was false, you weren't. So if it is true, you go ahead. If it was false, you give a message on the screen saying something is wrong with your input. Now that something is what I don't like, right? So I don't know what the problem was. Was it because I didn't give it in the right format? Was it because I gave it out of range, or what happened? So you don't know what happened, but you just know that something went wrong. So this is another way of using, another way. And again, I've seen some students doing it. And again, there is nothing wrong in it. But now all you can say is if result, do my calculations, else a generic message on the screen. And again, if the requirement is that I want to see a separate error message in each kind of problem, then you won't be able to do it this way. But it can be done here also. That's another way of using try parse. I'll stick to my way of doing it just because I think that's how I do it. Okay. So what do? You check if it is not equal to empty. So I said you could avoid this if, and I can show you how, but let's try it. Now, try. We'll remove this. What are you trying to do? You are trying to convert this text into an integer. And I'm going to use my way of doing it. So I'm going to try to convert this text to integer. So when you use try parse, then you definitely don't use the try block, because try parse is a replacement of the try block. Okay, so then you don't use a try block. I'm using try blocks. Okay, so you start try. You say I'm trying to convert the quantity and parsing it and converting my text into quantity. If everything goes well, if it's okay, then it will do this, whatever you were doing, it will do everything, right? Everything. If not, end your try block here. So you're saying I'm trying to do everything. Okay? If this error occurs, what do I do? If this error occurs, what do I do? And so on. You're just writing more catches. Okay, so I started. So what do? All code that you had, put it in a try block after the if, because the first thing you check is the quantity provided? Oh, so this is outside. Yeah, we are okay. I'll have to see where the if is. Okay, so if it is not empty, try to do this. So try. So where is the if quantity was provided? Yeah, here. We'll have to remove this. The catches go inside that too. Oh, Control Z, Control X, and here. So this is your if. If you don't have it, it's before the else. There is only one else after it, because it says please provide the number of coffees to be ordered. Okay. So now what I've done, I took that if, which said if it is not empty, and inside that if it is not empty, I'm putting my try catches. So I said try to do all this. So try to do all that you were doing before. Catch a format exception if it occurs. So you write it like this. Give it a name. Since I'm dealing with the quantity field, it kind of helps me if I can write it this way. What do you want to do? If it is an overflow exception, you need to know the names of these exceptions. And how do you know them? Documentation, right? Documentation. This is called, it just like it's me, you could have called it E1, E2. Don't call it E, please, because E is already a parameter in your methods. Remember, E is a default parameter in your methods for event arguments. Don't use E. You could use EX1 or whatever. And suppose I'm saying all other kind of exceptions. So notice what I've done. I've created 3 catch blocks. So that's the end of my try. What did I put in try? I said all my code where it says if it is not equal to empty, whatever you want to do, I've put that in my try block, right? So starting from there till the end, before your else, this was already there. This is your ifs quantity. If it is not equal to empty. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to, let me format it. Control ED is format. So this is what I'm saying. Try to do, convert it into whatever and do whatever, all that thing that it doesn't change. But now, if a format exception occurs, what do I want to do? If an overflow exception occurs, what do I want to do? And if any other kind of exception occurs, what do I want to do? So now I have the option of writing my error messages. And how do you show it? Just if you just want to see what occurs. So let's try with the message box.show. Remember your message boxes.show? Your message boxes.show will show a message. Just so that I can show it to you. Just what will the system give? Let's try that. What will the system give? Which is not too neat, but here. So this is your exception object that got thrown. And if you want to get the message, I think it's called message. It didn't help me. Oh, quantity FE. That's why it didn't help me. I think it's a capital. Just because I don't use it often. I think it's a capital M. There it is, message. If you want to show the default message here, let's see what the default message is. Something not very neat, but let's see what it says. Okay, it will say input string is not in a format. We saw it in the method, but anyway, let's try. So see what will happen now. Okay, let's try to give an AA, right? The blank will already be taken care of because I have an if. I'll show you how you can do it here too. See, this is the message that is given by the system. It says input string was not in correct format. Not very helpful. God knows what input string is. If it would be nice if I could say the quantity. So I name the field. Input string could be anything, right? So again, this is an example of a generic error message that makes no sense to a common user. That's not what you want to show to the user. You want to exactly tell the user what went wrong. So something like quantity must be a whole number will make more sense, right? So that's why. So you could, if you like, you could use the error messages. But notice our aim is to give something that makes sense. For please provide the number of coffees to be ordered. Makes sense. You're telling the user that you have to tell me how many coffees you needed. So you can't leave it blank. Okay, so something like that. So we'll come here and we'll change this. So you could show it like this. I mean, nothing is wrong, but I prefer to give a message. Okay, so here. So something went wrong in your quantity. You could say quantity. So that's kind of bringing the user's attention to the quantity field. Quantity of coffees. You could be as elaborated as you like. Needed must be a whole number. Now you can't even say an integer to the poor user. Maybe the user has no idea what an integer is, right? So this is to the common user. Maybe he doesn't even know what a whole number is, but what else do we say? Or you can say a number. You could say a number. You can't even give a real number. Even that will throw an overflow exception. Because why? Because you're trying to do an int.parse. So even that won't work, okay? So here's your message. Let's kind of go and remember the caption now. You can, instead of saying input error, now this will show in quantity. You can say quantity input error if you want. The third was your OK button. And if you don't bother to do it, you can, of course, leave it alone. And the fourth was your icon. And again, if you would like to say error, it's up to you here. And it's always a good idea to bring the focus back to the erroneous field so that the user says, oh, there is where it went wrong. You could do a select all if you like. It's up to you. You could do a select all if you like. You could clear it if you like. And bring the focus back. So select all and focus back. Oh, our focus was also missing in one of the other, in the clears, right? We'll do that too. Here, this is what I would do. So you're saying quantity of coffees needed must be a whole number. Now, a common message, if you were not doing the if yourself, please provide the number of coffees to be ordered. I would have put an if else here. So if you wanted to remove that outer if, you could check, was it empty here, right here? You could do that here too. So format exception will occur if you leave it empty or if you give something that cannot be converted into an int. Empty means it cannot be converted into an int. So if you have a if outside, good enough. If you want to incorporate it within your format exception, you could do it right here. You could say if text quantity dot text is equal to, I mean, this is another way of doing it. Whatever works for you. As long as I have my error messages, I don't care. Right? You could have said an error message here. You could do it here. You could show your error here. You could do it here too. And then you could have said else, and then else means in all other cases. That's another way of doing it. You don't have to put an outer if you don't want to. But some programmers argue that why should we even try to parse? If it is empty, let's stop, which is good enough. There's nothing wrong in it. Right? So again, whatever you prefer. As long as I see a message, I don't mind. So notice in my empty one, what was my error message is, please provide the number of coffees to be ordered. And I said input missing. You can say cannot leave it empty. You can kind of complete it. You can say cannot leave it empty. I mean, that's up to you. Your error messages are up to you, but they must be complete and clear. Or if you don't want that outer if, you will have to do it here then. You'll have to do it here. But somewhere you have to tell me what's happened. What do you want to do in the overflow exception? Same kind of problem. So instead of quantity of coffees needed must be a whole number, what will you say? Quantity value out of range. Now that out of range could be anything. It could be negative of now. Hopefully no user will kind of go 1, 1, 1 or whatever, a value outside range. Nobody wants coffees that are out of that range. You know that's a huge number. 214748364 is the integer limit. Nobody will ask for those many number of coffees. But again, from a programmer point of view, you will take care of every kind of exception that can occur. So here is what I can say. I can say out of range, and now this is again a quantity input error, and then you can say the OK button and the R. And again, always bring back your focus and select all. Instead of select all, you can do a clear. It depends on you. It's not necessary to do a select all. Select all just kind of keeps the input, and so the user can see what went wrong. So you can always do this also. You have this option of clearing up. You can do this if you like, doesn't matter. And then in this one, we don't know what happened. To be very truthful, we don't know what happened. So what will we do here? We'll take that quantity exception that we created, that object. That's the best I can do because I don't know what occurred, and show its message. It's a string. Oh, spelling is wrong. No, quantity. Oh, the spelling is wrong here. There. So here we have no idea what exception occurred. So I took care of the format exception, I took care of the overflow exception, and I exactly gave messages that made sense. But here I don't know what exception occurred. So I'm kind of taking care that any kind of exception will be caught because I don't know what kind of exception occurred. I let the system give me its message. You can do more things with your exception object. This is called an exception object, guys. This is called an exception object because it's the object that gets thrown when an exception occurs. Now there's no throwing going on here. There's no throwing of balls going on here, but that's what it is said. In terms of programming language, we say an exception is thrown, right? And this is your exception object. And with the exception object, if you try to put it, if you kind of bring your mouse and you try to do a dot with it, you will see there are a few things you can do with it, right? So there are a few things you can do with it. I just went with message. That's how I went with it. You can also show the stack of errors. What happened, what called what, and what happened, and so on. You can even show that in Java too, and in C# too. You can show it. I forget, trace stack or something. That method is called trace stack or something. So it's up to you how you want to do it, right? So hopefully this error will never occur, but again, we don't know. So the programmer will always take care of all kind of exceptions. So now let's see how it works. The only thing that was in that clear method, let me put it, otherwise I'll forget it. The clear for next item was not bringing the focus back to your, oh, we did a clear all input. Yeah, we forgot to do focus back to your, maybe we did it here. See here, I did a text quantity focus here, but I didn't do it there in clear all. So I did it in the new order button, but I forgot it in the, it was just looking odd. I'm just making it user friendly. Your interface should be user friendly. Okay, having said that, let's try it now. Let's see what happens now. So let me do this. Let me put my changes. That's the only change I've done. Okay, doesn't seem like. Anyway, what do I do? Branch. So I added a try catch block. Catch blocks, not one. I did. Okay, so let's say changes. What do I say? Add. So somewhere. Commit all. Sync to share. And then push. Hopefully things have gone to. So if I open up my, oops, no, sorry. If I open up my, I thought I had it open. Oh, there it is. If I open up my Tuesday coffee sales, there it is, right? So we just added a try catch. So I did mess up last week and I tried to revert and it was a huge, like there were so many repercussions or consequences, I kind of gave it up. I removed the whole repository and I added a new repository. So till now you won't see the changes I did, like version control. I couldn't do it because I don't know. But now today onwards, hopefully I'll take care. Okay. I'm learning GitHub myself, guys. Like, and revert, I've never done a revert. So I did do a little homework on it, but I messed it up. But anyway, so there we are. So everything now is on GitHub. Okay, so whatever we've done. Okay, now let's try it. See what happens. Okay, so now if I leave it empty and I try to do a calculate selection, this is coming from your outer if. You can remove it. I told you you could. You don't need it. I could put it in my try catch and it will make, and I'll make it work. If I do something like AA, quantity of coffees needed must be a whole number. So that's the error now coming from format exception. Let's try that. Notice that's a select all and focus. Try to give a 1 now. And let's try a cappuccino. Or let's try this. I'm going out of range. Okay. Quantity of coffees is out of range. I again do an okay. It gets selected. And then again, if I say 1 now, I go this and I go this. I'm okay. So the rest now works. Right. So I've taken care of exceptions with my quantity field. And that's what we need to do. This is called exception handling. So what did I do? I had a try. I had as many catch blocks as I needed. Each catch was catching a particular exception. Which exceptions to be caught have to be, there's no hit and trial here. There is no guessing game here. Which exceptions need to be handled that information can be gathered from the method you're using. And once you know which exceptions need to be handled, catch, please see that catches are put in the proper order from from specific to more generic, right? And again, if you don't know what is more, which is the biggest class, what is subclasses, you have to look at the API or in the documentation and find out what is, I know exception is the biggest subclass of exceptions, and then you can create your own, not your own, then it has subclasses. Now, could you create your own exceptions? Could you throw an exception on your own? Definitely you could. Let's see how you can do that. Okay, so let me go to design. It's just easy to go from here. Okay, so till here we were okay. So as I said, if you want, you can remove this if, and you can exactly put this here just to show you it's not a big deal at all. You can do it right here. It's a format exception too. So just very quickly, let me do it for you. So I'm going to show this message box. I'll take the same message box from here. I'll put it here. And of course, the message that's there is not so neat. So I'm going to say, please provide the number of coffees to be ordered. Just change the message. That's all I'm doing. It's a format exception. I'll say quantity missing error. I'm doing the same thing. I'm just not, there it is. Okay, and one more, there it is. And see, so now the format exception is catching it. So if it is saying, oh, if you're empty, I want to do it, else I want to do this. Here, you could do it this way. And of course, if you do it this way, then then you'll have to remove this if. So be very careful of what you're removing, okay? Because you exactly have to know what you're removing. So you can remove this if, you can remove this opening bracket of if. I'm removing it from the top. I'm just saying format will catch it, right? This is another way of doing it. So remove that if, and then just start your try. If you try to parse and you put an empty, you don't put anything, a format exception. So I've removed this if. Please remember to go down and starting from its quantity greater than 0, comment it out. I don't have those ifs now. I have a try block now. And the try is doing everything. Right? Try is doing everything. So I have a try and then I have catches. I have try and have catches, and it will still work. It will still work. See. Oops. No, what did I mess up? Yeah, this is what happens when you try to do something that doesn't work. Okay, so what did I? So that's in the try. Quantity greater than 0 is what I removed. Okay, I've messed up something for sure. And that's my brackets that I've messed up. So what did I do? I said we will remove the if and the opening brackets. When I did that, you should have a matching, closing matching. So that's one if, that's the else. Those are catches. That's a catch. That's a catch. Oh, I know what I did. I made the wrong one. I commented the wrong one. That was of the quantity greater than 0. Whereas we had to do of after the comments. See, I make mistakes even after putting comments there. And this is the one I wanted to, there. Now we are okay. I removed the outer if and I removed its else. And I caught the empty box, the empty quantity right in my format. It is a format exception, guys. It is. So if you choose to do it this way, there is nothing wrong in it at all. It's perfectly fine, right? And let's see now. So if everything is okay, leave it empty. See, same message is coming up again. I just moved it into the format exception catch. It's still catching it. And that's what it should do. You can't convert an empty string into an int. So whatever makes sense to you, do it that way. It's really doesn't matter to me. As long as I have my correct error messages, it says, please provide the number of coffees to be ordered. And there it is. Right? So I don't need a select all here actually, because there is nothing to select. Remove that. I just copied and pasted. Remove that. I don't need a select all. There is nothing to select. It is an empty string. Right? That format exception takes care of it. So now I've kind of made my code foolproof. Right? Now, if you see, I've only handled exceptions that are being thrown by the system, like format exception, overflow exception. But as I was mentioning, and I'll again mention it. So for example, you've done an if quantity is greater than 0 here, right? You've done an if quantity greater than 0. In the else part, instead of giving your message right here, the number of costs should be greater than 0, you can throw an exception here. You can throw an exception here. You'll say, what's the use? I mean, I just want to show a message box. Some programmers prefer to always throw exceptions and then catch them. That's perfectly fine too. And then you will add a catch block to your outside try and say, oh, this is what will be caught. You can try that too. So you can throw an exception of, like you can say, throw new exception and then just give this message. And then you can catch that exception of whatever. Like it can be done. There's nothing wrong in it. Some programmers do it. Instead of showing a message box here, a new exception is thrown. An exception is thrown and an exception is caught. I can try it for you if you like. I mean, for these small things, I have never thrown exceptions, but you could do it. So for that one, maybe we'll have to, because I need to catch it, right? I'll have to create a class, I'm sure. And in that class, I'll have to extend the exception class like I do in Java and do it. You know what? I won't waste time right now. I can maybe when you do it, your assignment, I can do this for you and then put it on Blackboard. Okay. So that way I'm trying stuff. I have the idea. I've never done it, but I can do it for you while you do your assignment. Okay. Any questions? So now I've only worked with one field. but I've given you the idea of more than one fields, right? So in more than one fields, you have nested try catches is what you have. And then in all these nested try catches, you have your own catches with the particular field that will cause the problem. Just so that you know, because you will need it in your assignment also, I have used a parse method that just parses it and puts it. But of course, parse method has 3 overloads. So you could even, if you were asking for, say, a price, the user can input the price with a $sign or without a $sign, for example. And you say, oh, what do I do? You can always ignore the currency symbol when you're converting from say a string to a decimal, because prices are usually decimal. Okay. So any questions on this? So this is your first introduction to try catch, at least in C#. Are you at the same stage in Java too? Have you done try catches in Java? Good. So Tony has already covered it, right? So there's nothing new in it. In the advanced course or before that? Oh, Jared has done it too?
Yeah.
In the first course itself?
Yeah.
Or the second one? Second one.
We did it at the end of the first, but we did a lot of it in the second.
Second. Oh, so you are quite familiar with it. And what about nested try catches? Not so much?
No.
Okay.
In Java, they're kind of to be avoided. You should just like put it into a method. So you should refactor it into a method by themselves so they don't conflict.
Oh, I don't understand what's
From clean code, but basically you shouldn't usually nest try catches, and you should limit the amount of stuff you do in a try catch. So like
you could call a method if you like.
People will have like a method. They'll be like try to add numbers, and they'll have a try catch, and they'll have an add numbers method inside of that throws an exception.
Okay, yeah, but you still have to have nested try catches, except that instead of putting your code inside, you can just call the method that will do it. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah.
Because you have to catch all the exceptions that occur for different input fields, right? If you have more than one fields, then you should have different error messages for all those fields.
Yeah, like it depends. For front end stuff, a lot of people really hate getting a message box saying that they like inputted something wrong when usually the correct option is just to do nothing.
Okay. So
like
they don't want to see.
Exceptions are best when they're used for like database connections or like network connections.
Okay, so in that case, if the user doesn't want to see a message box, then how would you tell the user that what has gone wrong?
They usually don't need to know. Like if they enter like foobar inside of a text field that's for numbers, then usually just like doing nothing is good. Or like another thing you could do that's kind of complicated would be to check the content, read it out as if it were a string, and if it's not an integer, then you like usually send some sort of event that will make, I don't know, some sort of label appear underneath.
Yeah, that could happen. That could be done.
But a lot of people just like hate having the
message box come up and click on the okay, because it's extra work for the user, right? It's extra work for the user to say an okay. But there should be some way definitely to show the error. Showing the label would not be a bad idea. That's something that you could do in the GUI for sure. Yeah. So you could put an extra label, and that's what I was saying. There's another way of handling errors where you just show the label. So the erroneous field can have something like a label coming up or something that the user doesn't have to kind of respond to, because here you have to respond to the OK button, right? And some users may find that irritating. But yeah, a better idea would be maybe instead of a message box, create a label on your form itself, and on that form show an error message. But some kind of error message, not every user is intelligent enough to say, oh, I entered a foobar and why am I getting an error? Like the user should know. But yes, instead of a message box, we could definitely, even here, we could create a label, an invisible label. A label, because if it's nothing, it won't show anything. Create a label on your form. Somewhere on your form, create a label. And then maybe on that label, just kind of the error message occurs here. And that's fine. And after the user has, and bring the focus back to the erroneous field, select all and focus back. And as soon as the user starts to enter something there, the label goes away. Right? That can be done. Then the user doesn't have to respond to the dialog box, which could be irritating. You're right, it could be irritating if they keep coming up. So error handling can be done in better ways, but it's still, the way is still the same. It's just that you don't show message boxes. You still have to handle them, right? How you choose to handle them is up to you. So showing error, if showing the dialog boxes is something that's not user friendly, and I do understand maybe Maybe it is not for some users. Just show an error label or something. It can be done in another way. But the behind the scenes, the code still doesn't vanish. The code still stays. The code to catch those errors still has to be present in the code. You know what I mean? It has to be there. Okay, so that takes care, at least from my side, it takes care of try catches. So I'm going to put this on you now. I'm going to give you stuff where you have more than one input fields. I only am working with one, and using this text document I'm giving you, maybe you could create a, maybe if you don't like the message boxes, do it with the label. I don't mind it. As long as I see a different error message is what my concern is. So I'll give you a break, but before I give you a break, I'm going to just show you what you need to do, and then you can take a break and come back and work on it or whatever works for you. So on Blackboard now, so maybe I can stop this because